Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to That's Effin' Weird. Tonight, we are talking about the Golden Fleet, and the person that's going to be heading this up is none other than Clark.
Hello, I'm one of your hosts, Clark. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Well, I'm Seth.
I'm Megan.
And I'm Grindhouse Zombie.
And from there, I'll take it. So the Golden Fleet, not to be confused with the Swedish Golden Fleet, which is an actual name for a branch of their navy from around the same time period. But this is the Spanish Golden Fleet. And the very first thing I want to point out is that this is somewhat of a misnomer because the Spanish actually never referred to this as the Golden Fleet. This is actually something that's been more of a recent moniker, I guess, that's been bestowed upon it. It sounds sexier because Spanish actually called it the Silver Fleet. And I guess silver doesn't sound as enticing as gold. So people have chosen to rename it here recently to make it sound more fun for treasure hunters, I guess. But in a nutshell, sum it up of what the Golden Fleet actually was. And this is a rather unusually large flotilla of ships that were kind of in a last ditch to be sent back to Spain to help fund their kind of ongoing feud with the British during this time. Now, Spain had been shipping silver, gold, jewels, emeralds, pearls, everything basically they could find since they consolidated their holdings in Central and South America, basically from the mid 1500s all the way until the mid to late 1700s. Now, these ships usually would go in little small flotillas. They'd be protected, obviously, from pirates and things like that by some kind of galleon, and usually led by someone with military experience on basically a flagship. This particular fleet is unique, though, in that, like I said, it was unusually large. There were 12 ships that went back to Spain during this time, and because it was very heavy laden with treasure, basically to, like I said, help fund this ongoing, I won't call it a war, but basically a off and on continuous feud that was going on between the French, the Spanish, and the English, and the Dutch thrown in there just for good measure, because, I don't know, they always want to be involved. So first off, to get into some background, the order for this treasure was actually put in 1712. And it took them 3 years of mining, minting, all this kind of stuff to kind of get it together. It was supposed to go off earlier in the year, but didn't actually end up leaving until early May, I believe. It was supposed to leave in April, and it did not leave actually until, actually I had to take that back. It did not leave until mid-July. This is actually two separate fleets. There's one coming out of Cartagena in Colombia, which is modern-day Colombia, and the other one was coming from Veracruz. So the actual names of these fleets were called the West Indies Flotilla, which was the one coming out of Veracruz. And like I said, they'd been doing this for almost 200 years at this point. And then the one coming out of Cartagena was called, I believe it's the Tierra Firma fleet. And the intent on this was to meet up when they left, meet up in Havana, and then sail together in one big fleet back to Spain for, navigation purposes and protection. They figured if they stuck together, they'd be best. Now, 11 of these ships were Spanish, and oddly enough, the 12th ship wasn't even supposed to be part of the fleet. It was in Havana already. It was a French ship called the Griffin. And because of seasonal laws that they had for foreign ships in Spanish ports, they basically told the captain of this French ship, you can sail back with the fleet, or you got to wait until they're back in Spain, and then you can go. They basically were going to shut them down and keep them in port unless they went back with this fleet. So the French captain said, okay, why not? I'm going, and actually I believe the captain was still Spanish, but it was a French ship that he was actually, they were hired to kind of outsourced, I guess you could say, to move some of this treasure back to Spain. So he said, sure, I'll go. So it's July 1715. They head out, and they're sticking to the Florida coast best they can, because when you're navigating in the 18th century, being able to see coast is a helpful beacon. So they're on the way back, and the French ship did not feel comfortable being that close to land because he was unfamiliar with the waters. So the captain actually stayed offshore farther And this ended up helping him because they run smack into a hurricane on the night of July 31st, early into the morning of August 1st. They will run smack into a hurricane right off of the Florida coast, and 11 of the ships are sunk. The 12th ship, the Griffin, oddly enough, like I said, the only French ship in the fleet, is the only one that actually made it back to Spain. So you have to keep the numbers here in mind, and I'll keep reminding the listeners about this. So 11 went down in this hurricane. 12th one made it back. Now, obviously, immediately Spain wanted their treasure. They're not just going to let billions of dollars in, gold and silver and jewels just hit the bottom of the ocean here. So they send a salvage team to recollect as much of this as they can. And this is within almost immediately, as soon as they can get them there, they send a salvage team. And there's actually a historical marker in Sebastian, Florida, where you can see where the actual original camp was set up for the salvagers. Spain will eventually give up the search in 1718, claiming that they recovered 80% of the treasure. This is largely considered to be a lie, seeing as what we know now. But they probably said that they recovered 80% of the treasure just to keep other salvagers and pirates at bay. Basically, they didn't want anyone going after their stuff. The Spanish government will continually claim that this is theirs, even through today. We'll get to the legal stuff later, though. So this kind of dies down for a long time, and everyone just kind of forgets about it until 1950, when a map shows up detailing from the time of where these ships were thought to be wrecked. And this starts getting, piquing a lot of interest in people that are kind of down there in Florida hanging out. And specifically a group that will become, their first name is Treasure Salvers, Inc. So what they'll come together as, they change names and then end up selling the salvage rights eventually to another business. But this is a trio of guys who were pretty much, one was an engineer, one was a historian, and the other one was a farmer turned retired scuba diver. And that becomes important because this is the 1950s and nobody really was into scuba diving at the time. So they had an advantage at having a very experienced diver with them and someone who could actually, navigate these waters and find these wrecks for them. The engineer will come into play because they literally have to invent technology on the spot for clearing sand off of the floor, or finding metal under the water. Like they basically created their own new metal detectors and things like that that would operate at under the water. Now, I also have to specify that a lot of these wrecks end up being found not too far off of Barrier Islands. The town Sebastian, Florida is kind of where they call it now the Treasure Coast, and it's about a 40-mile stretch where the ships that have been found are pretty much located where we can see where they're at in about a 40-mile stretch from north to south. So
Clark, if we teach Seth to scuba dive, the three of us have pretty much got this, is what you're telling me.
Oh yeah. We'll get to. There's still treasure down there, and there's stuff to be found.
All right, Seth, get your flippers. We're going.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to retire now. So these guys, this trio, they get together, and they get the necessary personnel and equipment and everything together, and they go out, and they end up finding 6 of these ships between, I believe it's 1960 and 1991. They locate 6 of these ships, and they find other ships too that weren't part of this, the Golden Fleet. I specifically want to mention this one because, like I said, it's so fascinating how many of them they've connected and know that it's specifically from this fleet. But this trio of owners and entrepreneurs will actually go on to find a lot of other shipwrecks also there, because Spain lost a lot of ships. It's almost amazing. Like, you got to think about how much they were pulling out of the ground and minting, and how many billions and billions of dollars, like in jewels and stuff, this is, because they lost so much of it, and we're still finding it today. And it's just incredible to think that they got anything back at all. But going back, they end up identifying 6 of these ships right off the bat in like a 30-year span, and they're living it up. These guys, like I said, multimillionaires to billionaires now at this point, and from everything they found. So much so that, like I said, they end up selling the treasure rights in 1993 when they're all getting older and kind of out of the adventuring side of it. They partied really hard too. There's a lot of photographic evidence of them celebrating their finds, and it's pretty interesting. I encourage you to look it up. They definitely knew how to party. So 6 of the ships have been identified, and this new business takes over the salvage rights, and they end up discovering up through, and this is up through 2012, they found 3 more ships. No, I take that back. 2 more. Sorry, 2 more ships. So 2 more have been located, which leaves us with 3 missing ships still from the fleet that have not been found, that are somewhere off the coast of Florida in less than 20 feet of water in some places. These barrier islands, you can literally walk on with a metal detector, and people are just pulling up gold, just finding it washed up. There are other rumors that hurricanes over the years have blown a lot of the debris inland, and now it's in the swamps and the marshes. People actually go magnet fishing and things like that and find all kinds of, iron conglomerates and stuff with gold coins in them, basically remnants of whatever wreckage from the ship. So they found a lot of stuff inland too, which is fascinating. But the story stands that over 1,000 to 1,500 sailors died during this storm that wrecked this entire fleet. And we are left with 3 missing ships that no one knows where they are, but there are theories, possibly. But yes, at this point, do you have any questions on what was on these ships or anything like that?
How did, originally Spain, what was the technology they used to try to recover it? Because I'm having trouble picturing what they used.
Well, like I said, a lot of these wrecks are pretty much anywhere from 10 feet. I mean, some of them are only in 10 feet of water.
Okay.
At this time, some of the masts would have still been visible. Diving bells, pretty much, that's still standard for the time. So that's not out of the realm of possibility that they could get in 10 feet of water and recover a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
So what is the treasure? I mean, if they're coming from South America, I'm assuming a lot of it's silver. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of it, the stuff that was coming out of the West Indies flotilla was, or I take that back, the Tierra Firma fleet was actually silver mined in Peru, moved up to Colombia, to Cartagena, and then put on ships and sent back. So a lot of silver ingots, a lot of pieces of 8, real silver pieces of 8. A lot of gold bullion, and then pearls, emeralds, pretty much a lot. Like they find a lot of precious metals and then gems down there, and that's what most of it is. And this was all just in trade for textiles and things coming back from Spain.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I know that when it came to call it the shipwrecks and people that were searching, if they were looking for ships that had ingots versus, say, ore, often the ingots were more valuable because the processing had already been done.
Yes. And most of these are stamped. Specifically with this fleet, most of the gold that's been recovered that are actually doubloons are stamped 1712. I mean, they are literally they were minted, stamped, and everything specifically for this fleet to get sent back. So that's how it's very easy to identify them actually still too. Much like the silver ingots and the pieces of 8 you'll see, they've got the year, they've got some of them, they actually have where they were mined and everything, and it's got the actual Tierra Firma stamps on it and everything with the Spanish crown and all. They're incredibly well detailed. I put, and I will drop them in the stuff across the internet. But I sent you guys pictures of some that I have actually in safe deposit boxes here. And I'll have to move those over when I get a second. But you can tell from those pictures I sent you. And also you see the jewelry. I sent the crosses and things like that were on there. Among other things, I have one particular one. I could not find it in time for the podcast. But oops, and my screen's going crazy. But I told you one of my favorite things that I have from the shipwrecks is a silver. It's like a Catholic knot. It's a very ornate looking silver knot, and then it has a hook on one end and like a straight I don't know what you want to call it, kind of a bulb end on the other. And I bought this thing specifically because the jeweler, like, it was actually this Treasure Salvers Inc. company, who I got it from. You can actually go to the museum. They have their own museum down in Sebastian, Florida now too, that you can actually visit and see a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the equipment they used actually to pull it up. It's actually fascinating. But when the guy was holding it and he was showing me, he's like, "Do you know what this is?" And I was like, "No, it obviously has a link on it. Like, it had to go on a chain." And he's like, "Yeah, it was worn around the neck. But do you know what it was for?" And I was like, "No, I haven't a clue." And they said, "This side is a toothpick and this side is a Q-tip." And it was just a personal hygiene tool that they would literally wear around their neck. And it's, like I said, this very ornate, like, Catholic knot in between holding the two pieces together. If I can find it, I will also put that and stuff across the internet. But there's a lot of, I don't know, interesting stuff that's got a personality to it as well, and not just money, but, like, you can tell, you got to remember there's a lot of people that died, transporting this stuff.
That sounds really cool. I want to see that. I was hoping
I
that
will try
this
to
was
do it.
near St. Augustine, Florida, because I really want to go check out the Spanish fort there, but it's not part of the Treasure Coast, it seems.
It's not, as farther north, but it is where the surviving sailors actually went to, because they didn't have anywhere to go. Actually, some of these guys that survived had to actually trek, like, I forget how many miles north to get to civilization and actually report, "Hey, the whole fleet just went down," because there was obviously no news. There was no no one was catching a text or an email.
Yeah, that sounds brutal.
Yeah, these guys went through
So
a lot.
it would literally have to be like the next ship going back to send word, like whatever shipping lanes or whatever.
Or would have been the French ship, the Griffin, once it landed in Spain and realized that there were no other ships that survived it. They would have to be the ones to break the news, probably. But that would have been, obviously days. That, the 17th century crossing the Atlantic, it probably took them close to a month.
Man, if I was like the king of Spain, I would be like, did they just book it with all my gold? Is this just a story? They living it up in the New World?
But what would you spend it on at that point? There's nothing. I mean, you'd have to go back to a Spanish-owned port for it to be worth anything.
Melt
Like,
it
if
down.
they had just stayed. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could.
So
do
you're
that.
saying back then they wouldn't have accepted certain stamps, like they would have known?
Yeah, well, I mean, think of it this way: if you had, this is 1715, so, like, if they're leaving Havana, which is a Spanish-owned port, where would you take it to spend it if you wanted to steal all that? I mean, you could go to a British port, but then would they accept it, or would they just seize it as, "Oh, you're Spanish, dignitaries, basically, you're representatives of the
So
Spanish
everyone's
government."
ally. Okay, there was allies things going on. Okay.
The French would rat you out because they were allied with the Spanish. The English would just seize the ships for themselves, because they'd be like, "Well, we're in open hostilities with Spain," so they would just take the, you could go to any kind of maybe pirate enclaves, but this is the very end of the golden age of piracy. I mean, the golden age of piracy is pretty much over in 1718 with the death of Blackbeard, and they really are cracking down on pirates at this time. So, Tortuga, places like that. But Port Royal is underwater at this point. It's been destroyed by an earthquake, so you can't go to a lot of these famous pirate havens.
Interesting. I wonder if people scuba dive around there. I would scuba dive at a pirate's cove.
Yeah. There's in Port Royal, I know a lot of people have recovered stuff from there, because about 80% of that city, like I said, fell off into the water when earthquake hit it. So that's one of my if we ever do movie theories and things that bother you about movies and historical accuracy, that's one that always gets me about Pirates of the Caribbean, is that it starts off in Port Royal, Jamaica, and by the time you get to On Stranger Tides, Blackbeard has already been killed and is yet mysteriously, alive. Not spoiling any plots here. So that would mean that Jack Sparrow would have to be basically immortal, because he'd be so old, and the life expectancy wouldn't be like 40 something years old during this time for someone in the Caribbean. So I don't know, it always bothers me that I'm like, okay, it has to be 1692 in the first movie if they're in Port Royal, but at the same time, it has to be at least 1718 by the fourth movie. because Blackbeard has already been quote unquote killed.
Okay. So I remember, I don't know if this is actually you would know this. For a senior trip, I stayed in Costa Rica. There was this boat that took us to this island. And from what I saw, there were like several little islands, but the one we went to was a particular one. It had a lot of really cool sandbars, and there was like some rock outcropping, like kind of like I don't remember a cave, but it would look, that's the kind of island it was. And there was a pig there that loved to be buried in the sand, and he was just like the pet like hog there, and you go to get drinks. And anyway, on the way to that island, the guides were pointing at another island that said that is Tortuga, that they filmed Pirates of the Caribbean in. Now, I don't know if that was actually Tortuga. I'm just saying that they said that was the island that they shot some of those scenes on or something like that. But I don't know if that's actually, Tortuga is actually near Costa Rica.
I always thought the real quote unquote Tortuga was still in the Caribbean.
Okay.
One of the chains like near the Bahamas and stuff like that, from what I always knew. But I mean, a lot of ships did, like I said, go down that way because that's where they were, Cartagena and Colombia. That's where they were basically leaving from, is not far from there.
Okay.
I think it's part of the Caribbean because I can't say for sure. I went on a cruise when I was 17 and they sold Tortuga rum cake. I went to the Bahamas.
What year was that?
That was 2008.
Oh, the prime time for pirates movies. I was getting those movie.
I just want to say I was obsessed with Johnny Depp, like in middle school, as Edward, I was obsessed with Edward Scissorhands, but I was obsessed with him in Sleepy Hollow, and everybody thought he was ugly. And then the Pirates movie came out in 2003, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, Johnny Depp's so hot." I'm like, "No, you can't do that."
So vindication.
Yeah, just
All right.
because he put on a pirate's costume, you can't. No.
So we're getting way too into Pirates of the Caribbean. Apologies, but those are awesome movies. Just saying.
All right. Any questions now moving forward before we start talking about some treasure?
Tortuga is an island in Haiti.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, still
we got fact checked.
I'll be the fact checker.
So one of the things I find fascinating too is they have the ships. They've actually been able to identify each one that they have found. I've not ever found. Let's see if they have the names of the ships that have not been found yet. But I just did find this kind of fascinating when you think about this, because two of these ships, like I said, well, one that was in the fleet was a French ship already, but one of the other ships that was the actual, it was the what you call the captain, I guess the whoever was basically overseeing the security for the flotilla. His flagship actually was called Nuestra Senora del Carmen y San Antonio, but it was actually a former British warship called the HMS Hampton Court that the British sold to the Spanish after it was retired in 1678. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. They had this big 70 gun ship that probably weighed about 450 tons, which also blows my mind that these, we talk about warships today being like 80,000 to 100,000 tons, and this is just a 400-ton galleon, but it was basically a third-rate ship of the line for this time. So it was actually pretty, it was outdated a little bit, but it's still a powerful ship. But they found that one. I don't want to just butcher all of these names, but the history on some of these ships and how they got just purposed, or repurposed in some cases for these flotillas is just, find it fascinating. They also, I like how they use this hurricane. One of my favorite video games ever, Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. That's actually, the opening of that video game is set in that hurricane. So they basically retconned history, which is what Assassin's Creed does anyway. But the Jackdaw is supposed to be the missing ship from the flotilla, that it actually wasn't the French ship that made it back to Spain. It's that Edward Kenway steals it and renames it the Jackdaw. And that's actually the 12th missing ship. That's actually the retconned history.
I'm so glad you said that. That is such a good game in that series. That's one of my favorites.
And there's a lot of other like pop culture mentions of it, and then the show Black Sails that's been huge here recently. It brings it out. It says actually they have an entire season kind of revolves around the 1715 treasure fleet in the first season, and then also the movie Fool's Gold that had I think that's Matthew McConaughey. Is that or is that the Paul Walker one?
Yeah, that was like
It is.
Diet National Treasure.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey,
Yeah.
Kate Hudson. That's actually what they're diving for in that movie is actually what they're looking for is the missing ships from the 1715 fleet. So there's some little pop culture references.
They needed Nicolas Cage in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have found it.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
He did very, very astutely with his super brain.
Still holding out for the third movie, but who knows? Anyway,
I would have been down for a third movie.
Yeah,
they're fun. They're fun. Good. Have you ever seen the Librarian movies?
Ooh, no.
They're kind of like a mix. Like it's kind of part Indiana Jones, part National Treasure, but they're very feel good, fun movies. They're a lot of comedy, a lot of like lighthearted because the main character is like super smart, but he's like not used to like gunfire and stuff coming his way. Yeah. So he always has to have like it's I would just encourage you to check them out. They were like TNT made for TV movies, but they're very, very good. They're all fun. The third one especially is really fun. So about the three missing ships, here's some of the I guess theories or possibilities of what happened to them. So pretty much everyone's in agreement that they sank. They probably were lost, just like the other ships were. One of the prevailing theories is that they made a run for it north, trying to get out of the storm. So they might be far, like they're thinking almost as far up as Savannah. So to the obviously Florida, Georgia border there. They're thinking they might be as far north as Savannah, actually. So somewhere off the coast there. That would be fascinating. I wouldn't mind taking a swing at that. Other theories are, like I mentioned earlier, that the debris has just been blown inland, and now it's actually in the marshes and swamps behind the barrier islands and not out in front of them like the 6 original found ships were. The 2 that were found afterward were found farther north than the original 6 ships, but they're thinking that's just the line they fell in, basically, as they sank and trying to run from the storm. So it doesn't necessarily confirm or debunk that the last 2 ships or the last 3 ships are as far north as Georgia.
Okay.
Now, do I have a personal theory on it? I think, yeah, they're just farther north and they might be in deeper water, and that's probably where they are. How they have not been found in the last 60 years since people started getting interested in this again, I don't know. We have a lot more information on this now because the original documents of the names of all the ships and what they were carrying has been released. The Cuban government actually had those records, and we haven't had particularly the best friendship with them over the last 60 years. So it's only been very recently that they've opened up and let us see those documents and see the actual original manifests with everything that was on the ships and the names of them. So that's a thing that I found interesting, that we're now able to really pinpoint and identify which ship is which. So, having said that, do you guys want to take a swing at it? I'm willing to go down to Florida.
No, I'm there.
We can stop at St. Augustine. I want to go.
Yeah, I mean, we'll pretty much if you're driving, you'll pass it anyway, so you might as well.
All right, there we go. I mean, look, if you're literally asking me, I mean, I don't know what it takes to get it scuba, but I would do it.
I've got 2 scuba certified friends. I'll ask them how long it took them.
Okay. And what are we talking in terms of boat rental cost? I'm a budgeter at heart.
I'll look into all that first.
Okay, cool.
I have a feeling we're going to be very primitive in this initial search.
I just find something. I saran wrap my metal detector. It's waterproof enough. Ooh, Flex Seal. I'll saran wrap it, then dip it in Flex Seal. There we go.
There you go. Not be able to
Make
operate
sure you
it
get
at all.
some flex tape in case we get a crack in the boat.
Yeah.
Slam
We'll,
it on
we'll
there.
get one of those screen door boats. It'll be real cheap.
I also want to go to Savannah, so we can check that out too.
That's on the way too. Like I said, if you go down 95, once you hit that, I mean, you're going to go through Savannah, Jacksonville, St. Augustine's, kind of a
Tybee
dip out of the way.
Island.
Hey, at some point we've got to do this. That's up and weird live on the road thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got to happen at some point. So
Well, if we go to St. Augustine, we can do a That's Effing Weird live from the Ripley's Believe It or Not.
we'll finally have a budget for advertising if we find some gold.
Yeah. All right. So, other than theories on where this might be, I did want to bring up one thing that I find fascinating, and that's the legal battle. As soon as these ships started being found, the Spanish government actually started claiming that it was theirs and tried to actually take these salvagers to court and basically tried to bleed them dry in court. I don't know how it was going to work too well if they were literally pulling up billions of dollars worth of stuff. They probably eventually were able to outlast the Spanish courts. And maritime law did finally, I guess, overturn that. But the Spanish government has tried time and time again. Basically, anytime one of these ships is found, they claim it as still being their property.
Why didn't they try to get it sooner? Like the Spanish government.
Well, like I said, they gave up in 3 years. So that their initial salvage endeavor started basically right when they heard about the wreck, and then they gave up on it in 1718. So the ships had only been sunk for 3 years before the Spanish gave up. I don't know if that's just because logistically they couldn't bring anything else up, like we talked about earlier. They didn't have the technology, or if it was just not worth it anymore, or really just, it was easier for them to say, write it off and we lost it, and tell people that they brought it back anyway, just so no one else will go looking for it.
Okay. So, question: who's in charge of maritime law? Is it a consortium of governments? Is it?
Generally, yeah, because obviously maritime law is governed by international laws. I don't know if it falls under a specific agreement, like if it's a UN agreement thing, because if that were the case, then there's certain countries that aren't part of the UN that technically wouldn't have a say in it, or could, you know what I mean? I guess it's like one of those things, if you don't want to play ball, then you don't have a voice in it, kind of thing.
Well, what's the distance? What's the distance off the coast again? Is it 12 miles or 14 miles? Something like that?
Not even that. Like these barrier islands are very close to shore, and they, like I said, these wrecks are sometimes in as little as 10 feet of water. So this is like not. I mean, you could walk out off the sandbar and pretty much start swimming, but they're basically in these inlets between all these barrier islands. So they're not far from actual coastline.
But isn't there a distance that off of your coast that whatever falls within that distance is effectively yours?
Yeah. Yes.
I thought it was 12 miles. I thought it was 12 miles.
I don't know what what legal leg they have to stand on to claim that that's their property still. But that would be something that would be worth looking into. Probably I would be curious at what their argument was, other than just saying that's our property. It has a seal that says, which is also funny because that's, that government is not still the same government. So that's like that's like a grandson claiming, someone finds their grandfather's whatever, his cigarette box full of money, or cigar box full of money, or whatever he buried in his backyard, and then sold the house, and then the new owners find it 70 years later, and the grandson wants to say that's his money because it was his grandfather's. That's what it seems like to me. It's like you're making a stretch there. It's like you don't own the house, you don't have anything other than like a picture of your grandfather burying the money in his backyard. So what right do you have to it?
What do you think is the right thing to do? Do you think it should be given back to the Spanish government? Or
I don't personally, since I don't think, one, it's not the same representative government, and two, there's got to be a statute of limitations on anything. I mean, you can't just wait until someone finds something 300 years later and then claim it's yours.
Yeah, it's like these treasure hunters did all the dirty work for the Spanish government, and they're just like, oh, hey.
Yep.
Pay up.
They're like, oh yeah, I left that there. Sorry. Can you give it back now?
Also, like, do you think that anybody who finds the treasure should be able to keep it, or do you think it belongs into like in a museum or?
Well, and that's kind of a fun thing too. So how they had to fund all this was they had a lot of investors. So to bring this company together, they had to have investors anyway. And actually, I believe I told the guys this when we were talking about this topic when I first proposed it. But my father went to one of these meetings where they were looking for investors to, and this was like in the early 70s. And like at the time, it was only like $1,000 like investment. And my dad just didn't have the money he could spend at the time. He really wanted to do it. And he had just gotten married to my mom, and she was like, no, don't spend all that money. $1,000 in 1970, that's a lot. So he just chose not to do it. Didn't have the, I guess, ability to do it at the time. And, he always tells me now, like, he's like, oh, they're still pulling stuff up off those ships. Like he'd be a multimillionaire now and retire, could have retired years and years ago. So it's one of those things where it's like hindsight sucks. But basically back to the initial question, they have kind of done their philanthropy on the side. So not only did they pay back their investors and all that stuff, and then they were able to basically fund all of their treasure hunting expeditions forever after that. And then none of them were going to have a real job ever again. But they also have opened up museums, and other exhibits and things like that to the public. So I guess that's their olive branch of, hey, yeah, we're super rich now from finding this stuff, but they also want to share the history part of it. So instead of donating anything to a museum, they actually just opened up their own museum, essentially.
Okay.
That honestly is almost the entire story as far as any other details or something I can think of that you guys have a specific question or I can mention, but that's basically where we're at now, is that there's still 3 missing ships out there. That's a lot of money, a lot of jewels and stuff. I encourage you to just look up the 1715 Spanish fleet, and look at images, just Google image it and see like some of the fascinating things they pulled off of these boats. I mean, it really ornate stuff. Like I said, there's a guy that's down there that has a $500,000 ring. It's 24 karat. He called it Aztec gold. It's gold from Central America, and then it's inlaid with South American emeralds. Has I believe 22 emeralds and set in it. So, and he holds this ring. He says just the total value of the gold and the emeralds is about $500,000 in that one ring. And that just gives you a hint at how much stuff, and how much the stuff is worth now too. It's just crazy to think of one little ring like that is $500,000. And this thing was, 11 of these boats just packed to the gills with, precious metals, already smelted and things like that, already stamped, sealed, set into rings and things like that. And, it's just fascinating.
Okay. So of everything tallied up, we basically know how much value was sunk to date? Where's the percentage of finds versus loss, or what's still out there?
Well, I've never heard a total between the 8 ships that have been found. It's got to be in the billions of dollars at this point.
So they don't have a general idea of what those ships most likely were carried in terms of bullion and coins, whatever. They're estimates.
Vaguely. They can kind of tell you what one of the silver ingots would be by itself in value, and then you can kind of go from there and be like, well, they found 80 of them here, they found 150 of them here on this ship or this, and go from there. And it starts adding up very quickly, and that's not even to value the minted coins and things like that. And then a lot of these things, like I said, the jewelry and stuff, you can only really put a price on the value of the metal itself and the actual gems. But I mean, like I said, there's a history and there's a personality value to that too, I would imagine. Because I mean, that's a craftsmanship that's no longer, available. Like how they did that at the time is, probably far different than what we have in any kind of, modern jewelers. And then, yeah, just like I said, there's a history behind it. Like someone wore that ring. It could have been one of the 1,500 sailors that died. You don't know.
Man, that would be so good. That would be crazy to go look for that. It would be crazy even just to get a small haul, like not, nothing nuts, not asking much, but you go in and you find like an ingot or two and a ring, or maybe even just a coin. That's got to be satisfying.
I like that.
Oh yeah.
Finding like arrowhead.
Yeah. I mean, I love, you guys know I like metal detecting. So the idea of it's like that when you finally find something where it's significant, that feeling is hard to beat. Even if it's like not really, a ton of value. It's like it was lost, and since then no one's been interacting with it. It's basically been like sealed off from time. It's just in general really cool.
Yeah, and that's also why I say there's like a personality value to it, and a historical value that can't really be priced because, for instance, that little toothpick, Q-tip combo thing that someone wore around his neck. Like I have that in my possession now in 2024, and in that one came off of a ship that sank in 1622. So that is a 402-year-old piece of jewelry that was practical. Like he probably literally used it to pick his teeth or clear earwax or something. And I'm holding it, I'm holding it in 2024.
Did you find any ancient earwax on it?
It would be really interesting if they if I know it was underwater for 300 plus years before it was found, but it would be really interesting to think like they could find any kind of DNA on that. And
yeah.
Oh, dude, that'd be sick. Clone the sailor.
I like certain types of finds that are the conditions are super right for preserving things, like oddly preserving them. Bog mummies, whatever. Yeah.
And I think about that sometimes too, is like the guy that was wearing that around his neck he had to have at least enough status to own. Like, I don't know how common of a thing that was to own, like a lot of sailors were broke. So I don't know if he was someone of any kind of importance or, what he ranked on his ship, so could be anything. Could be a navigator, could have been the captain of a ship.
Yeah, I don't think like personal hygiene was like a thing it wasn't really common amongst like poor folk, I guess.
Yeah, and being completely made out of silver too, and like kind of so ornate and everything like that, and having like a religious connection to it too. Like it had to be somebody of some kind of status.
Man, one find that I think is really cool in Egypt, that meteorite dagger that was for one of the kings, like this super like one-off things that are made. It reminds me of that.
Yeah, that was found in Tutankhamun's tomb, and also was the inspiration for George R. R. Martin to do Dawn, the sword of Alstain. Yeah, because it was forged from a meteorite. Yeah, that's because George R. R. Martin took a lot of inspiration from real history to throw into the Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. So I always found that fascinating. That's where he got that idea from.
Well, I wanna hunker down and watch The Librarian. I'm in that mood now.
See, history's fun, guys.
It is. It is.
Indeed.
I like bouncing off all the weird things I've heard for you to smack them down. But some things have stuck. The whole Hunting Hiller episode was great. There was like some things I was like really scared weren't true, like the possibility, but then you're like, no. They were definitely in South America.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I don't know. History has a way of being being disturbingly mundane and ruining your ideas and theories, and then at the same time you can tell a story that is so wild and unbelievable that you couldn't put it into literature because no one would take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this bleeds in perfectly well. Oak Island's whole thing. Have you been keeping up with that? Because apparently they're finding more stuff, and they're doing this new like drilling tunneling method to like put in. So their objective, I think, this year is to get like a guy in one of those cavities, and they believe they found one of the unflooded shafts. And the stuff that they have been pulling out is impressive. Just the fact that there's ancient parchment with words on it down there is crazy. The fact that those silver guys were estimating how much silver, because they did those water samples in like the previous season, they're estimating how much silver in a given time and all of that would have to be down there for it to register as that parts per million. It's insane what's down there, and the level of engineering of whoever hit it, which sounds very Knights Templar-ish to me. But that I feel like if there's a substantial discovery there, that would take the cake, like in 2024, 25.
Also, in crazy history news, I just saw this about a week ago. They are fairly confident. Say fairly because it's still stretched in my mind, but it'd be awesome if it's true, that they may have located Genghis Khan's tomb.
What?
So, that's been one of history's
our great ancestor for most of us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we each have a little bit of him in us.
Yeah.
Because he was a man whore.
Basically, yeah.
Sweet.
He spread his seed. Spread his seed good.
He had to. He killed 10% of the world's population.
So fucked up.
Well, and did you guys see that for the Osiris Rex mission, they finally got the top off of the capsule? And,
yeah,
and
I heard that.
The inside, they posted a really nice high res picture, and it looks like a bunch of black rocks and dust. But I was still kind of excited that they were just, as an engineer, it was fun to watch people struggling with an engineering problem. We have 2 stuck bolts, you know.
Yeah.
And
I read that, and I thought of you. I specifically thought of you.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, and they had to solve it within a very safe and very confined space where they couldn't just introduce new things because there was a protocol in place. I thought that was kind of, because like, if it was me, I would have been in there with a cutting torch and a sledgehammer and just be like, let's get this bitch open. But it was fun to watch. It took them 3 months to solve the problem of loosening up 2 stuck fasteners. So I don't know. For me, that was fun. Did
any of that kind of blow your mind how they did it, or was it interesting to you how they finally solved it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Just having to create new tools and have all these new tools certified to go into the environment. I mean, I love their protocols because for what I do every day, sometimes you have to solve problems on the fly. And when they solve problems, it's okay, here's the problem solved. It's going to take us 4 weeks to be able to test it. And that's just so aggravating as somebody who wants to see forward progress, that it's like, like just let's get to it. But that's their protocols. Yeah.
I hope they found some fossils or something.
What breakfast?
Oh, it was the NASA was trying to get their rover vault thing that they collected rocks from on Mars. It was Mars, right?
No, it's not Mars. It was Comet Bennu. That's what it was.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I forget which one it was. I think it was a Japanese asteroid that they landed on. I saw the video, which is basically like stop motion because the shutter triggers every few seconds or whatever. Anyway, it was crazy seeing like something land on a body of that low G in that manner. It was extremely alien. It was like a weird fever dream watching that for me.
What was it?
Yeah, it's fun to watch. The thing touches down and then it has this purge of nitrogen that purges and spews up all the rocks into the container, and then the craft itself then has a dust off where it just goes poof and it goes off and watching the landing of that. if you're ever bored, go on NASA's YouTube channel. There's always something awesome happening, and just watching that come down and watching how they collect it and do it's maybe not to everybody, but to me it was wild as hell. I thought it was just awesome.
Yeah, man, the James Webb Telescope, specifically about space and different things that they've been able to pull off. The James Webb Telescope is really interesting, and they accidentally found a starless galaxy, however that works, and it apparently is like a congealed mess of stuff that is slated to become stars. But it looked crazy. It was like a piece of like opal. It was weird, like translucent fog that was like in this huge region, and they zoomed in on it. It was pretty cool. But every now and then, whatever they capture with the James Webb, yep, that's it. It's just quite crazy. Whatever it is that we live in is crazy. Don't know what it is, but it's crazy.
You live in a drop of water in somebody else's universe.
Yeah, I mean, you got all this stuff going on, just cool and terrible all at once.
There was this speaking of just like odd reality check, there is this book called Exhalation by anyway, it's called Exhalation, and it's basically this book about these creatures that are kind of like in their Renaissance era, and the speaker, man, it's almost like I can't, it blew
Ted Chiang.
Yeah, Ted Chiang. Exhalation, Ted Chiang. Anyone listening, I highly recommend that. It's a short read. It's like less than 2 hours. It's a short story. But man, that blew my socks off.
Wild.
Yeah.
I listened to the audio version. It was wild. Like, I thought it was having a fever, but it was really cool. It was like beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, the space is fun. We should have just a space episode.
Oh, I could talk. Yep, I could talk space and its virtues all day long and twice on Sunday. You got it.
You kind of the ocean is kind of like space in a way.
Yes, absolutely.
Very unexplored and weird as fuck, and like so much stuff is in there. Now we got shipwrecks and treasure. We got planes.
What creeps me out about space is with water, there's like a barrier. You know, even if it's like takes forever, there's gonna be an end. The space thing not ending freaks me out.
Well, also the craziest thing, and I don't know why this is so mind blowing, but the fact that you'll never even reach the end of space, even if you could, because the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light. And if the speed of light is what we have determined in our minuscule little brains as being the intergalactic speed limit, like we're not going to be able to go faster than light, then you will never catch the end of the universe. Because even if you're going the speed of light, it's being outrun by the darkness.
Yes, but you take that into consideration, and then it's like, if it's expanding, what is it expanding into? Are we talking about energy, matter, all of that? And then is the thing it's expanding into nothing? And is there even such thing as nothing? That's what's hard for me to wrap my head around. If there actually can be like a zero state of absolute nothing. That's what's crazy. Because it seems like everything needs some kind of a matrix or like membrane to exist in. I don't know. That freaks me out. That the universe is expanding, but what is, if the universe is everything, what is expanding into?
Good luck sleeping tonight.
I just want to also add that, back to the ocean stuff, that I did not know that it's James Cameron who did the Titanic movie, right?
Yeah.
That he went to the bottom of the fucking like the Mariana Trench, like the deepest point, what is it called again? It's
Challenger Deep. Yep.
Challenger Deep. Yeah, and
yeah.
I was so angry when I found that out. I was like, why? Why was he down there? But he's like, what was he like the second person ever to go down there? There was like the two scientists back in like the 60s.
I think he's the guy that went further. It was the Marianas Trench, wasn't it?
Well, it was the Challenger Deep that's in the Mariana Trench.
Okay. I just remember all the memes that came out when he did it, because there was like this meme format on 4chan where it was like this hand-drawn diagram of a door that James Cameron found at the bottom of the trench.
He did the Avatar movie, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the second one sucked.
I've not seen the second one. I don't remember the first one. I watched it when it came out, but I just all the stuff about like missing, shipwrecks, ocean stuff. The only reason why I found this out was like y'all, of course, remember the submarine that went missing. It imploded last year, around the Titanic wreck. And when I found that, I was like, James Cameron hasn't, like, why does he have that much money? First of all, to have like all this stuff.
Yeah, and he also is the guy that said one of our greatest modern challenges is the too much testosterone. So try to figure that one out.
What? Why would he say that?
I don't know. It was in relation to his weird like Gaia life flow philosophy that he put in all his Avatar movies, which is cool. That was like a really offhanded comment that I found disgusting.
Why hasn't James Cameron went and found the treasure of the Golden Fleet? That's my question.
He could.
He
Not deep enough.
It's not deep enough.
He has the tools. He has the money.
He saw that someone came to him and was like, "Hey, we got it. It's not deep enough. I'm sorry."
Because he went to the Titanic several times apparently, which I didn't know.
Oh, by the way, isn't the Titanic like really degrading right now? Isn't it like really falling apart down there?
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't have that many decades left before it's just a rust stain on the bottom of the floor.
I think you're the one that brought that up in a way. I don't even know how many episodes ago, but that was the first time I was like, oh, that has a time limit. I never really thought about it that way.
Well, it's been down there for 112 years. I mean,
yeah,
that's a long lifespan for iron. It is kind of is what it is. I mean,
yeah, in salt water too.
Mm-hmm.
And wooden ships, like all these shipwrecks, like what is there? I mean, I guess they last longer, maybe, right?
It depends. It depends on how old they are. They really degrade pretty rapidly too. If been around any kind of like swamp or any there's a lot of like blackwater swamps and brownwater swamps where I live, and wood under there gets extremely porous and soft. A lot of these ships were made out of oak. They're or depends on, some of them are made out of like European pine and things like that. They're usually a conglomerate of different woods actually, because some of them need to be malleable and some of them need to be stiffer, depending on what its purpose is on the boat. So some of that wood will degrade faster than others. You see a lot of like the live oaks and stuff like that are more water resistant because that's where they grow naturally. But like some of the pines and stuff won't. A lot of these boats, when you think about, it's a shipwreck, they're not noticeable as like a rounded ship anymore. Like they almost leave like an imprint, like a footprint on the ocean floor where they have just kind of degraded, and all the contents that were inside them, like you can almost see where, if they haven't broke up when they sunk, if it just sank like intact, sometimes you can even see like the ballast stones, like where they're left over almost still in line, like where it would hit the bottom. And just as the wood degraded, you see the ballast stones, you'd see whatever the contents of the hold were and things like that. And then a lot of times they're actually just covered in silt and sand because just the weather patterns, is constantly moving under. So that's why they need metal detectors to find a lot of this stuff, is because it's still covered under, inches of sand sometimes.
I like how Florida was still on its bullshit with all the hurricanes back in the 1700s and 1600s and all that, because it is a nightmare down there with all those hurricanes. Like, it's insane.
they did I think there was an estimate that was since Europeans landed like in the New World, they estimate that hurricanes have killed like I can't, it was a ridiculous number. Like it was like, I don't want to say this wrong. I can't remember if they said it was 50,000 or if it was like, it might be more than that, but it was just insane to think that's how many sailors like just in these trips like lost their lives. And that's like up to today. And today, obviously we know we have a lot better warning systems and it's your own fault if you get killed by a hurricane at this point.
Yeah.
But
when did they
just
start naming hurricanes?
They didn't actually start doing that until, well, so I don't want to like misjudge this because in the East where they have typhoons, they actually have been kind of giving them names since, I mean, gosh, I know the Japanese usually name their typhoons some kind of, they'll name them after something, all the way back to like shogunate eras and stuff like 1400s and, even before that, because they were naming them even when like I said, when Genghis Khan was actually around. And so it's been like the 1200s when Japan was invaded by the Mongols, or they tried to invade twice. They actually named those typhoons also. So different cultures, I guess, have been doing it longer, but I don't think we had a like an actual naming system in place until pretty much the 20th century here in America, at least. Usually they just called them like the Great Storm of whatever year before that.
The Great Storm of '89. But
we have the Halloween blizzard of '91 here where I'm at. So, yeah, yep.
Was it like super bad?
Halloween into the next 2 days, we got 3 feet of snow.
Man.
So that one's still talked about.
You got a whole other deal up there with weather. I can't wrap my head around it. I've been to like the Great Lakes and that that like dead winter, and that reformed what I thought really cold was in my brain. I remember the wind coming off, and it was like razors cutting my hands. It was insane cold. I've never experienced that kind of cold. So yeah, here is pretty. Even though we get some gnarly ice, it's. I finally realized that how cold can be. Like before that, like watching movies where people are completely bundled up and trying to survive in like a inhospitable ice tundra or whatever, is kind of hard for me to, I don't know, wrap my head around that until then.
Well, you truly haven't lived until you've gone camping when it's -30 outside. Then you lived. That's a whole different. It goes from trying to stay comfortable to trying to stay alive, and it's a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass. And the first time I did it, my wife actually took me, and there was a point in the middle of the night where I was like, you know what? It's over. I'm done. I can't. I'm so cold. It does not matter. And turns out that wasn't the case, and she, being her little slight self, she brought me through, as our ladies always will do. They will save us. But that was horrible. But then, at the same time, there's a place. So I'm in Minnesota. So there's a place off to my east and north a little bit called the Apostle Islands. And usually it's been every 5 or 6 years, but it's been less frequent lately. These, the waters of Lake Superior freeze, and you can actually walk across the ice and explore the Apostle Island ice caves when things are truly frozen. I think Alice and I did it probably in 2014, and it was wild walking across a frozen Lake Superior and then like being able to bob in and out of these little crevices and go in and find these ice caves that are hundreds and hundreds of feet long, but you're walking on the frozen lake ice, and then the cave is the stone above you. It was so wild, but it's just it's that thing that I think we've talked about it before. It's that part of just living and doing and exploring new things, and sometimes you just got to be in the right place at the right time. And We've gotten pretty lucky here. So we've had some, and those ice caves were, it's funny because they got to a point where they had so many people coming down that wanted to walk the ice that were ill prepared for it. People that showed up in their sweatpants and their Converse and like, I'm going to go walk the ice. And it's like, no, you're not. I mean, and my wife and I had our backpacks, our water, our ice cleats, multiple layers, headlamps, everything. And people are looking at us like, what are you doing? Like, what is like, and it was like, hey, think what you want, but we're the people that are prepared for this, you know? So if something were to go wrong, guess what? We're not going to die or have to be taken off the ice in a helicopter. You know,
Yeah.
we're the ones that will just walk back and go, oh, I'm a little cold, but I'll live, you know? Yeah. So that's, if you're ever up here in the winter and the ice caves are open, do that because it is absolutely mind blowing. There's nothing like it.
Islands, Minnesota ice caves. All right.
Wisconsin. It's actually in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay.
Yep. But it's on Lake Superior. There is a photographer / author that I can't think of his name, but he sells a couple of different books that are his photography of the ice caves, both in the summer and the winter. And they're just beautiful. They're just beautiful. We encountered him on one of our trips. He was taking pictures of the ice caves from the inside. And these are normally
crazy looking.
Yeah. It's caves that are normally only accessible in the summer via kayak because there's no other way to get there. But in the winter, when you have a good year and the ice is thick enough, you can go out there and you can walk on it. It's just wild.
This is beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
That's so cool.
I'm down.
I've been spelunking before, but it was like went through someone's property on like a farm in Portland, Tennessee. And it's just like a little cave like in a creek. It was a long cave. It was like a mile. Like this was a long time ago, and it was cool because like it's always like 50 degrees in there, or like 50 something degrees, and it was just full of water. Like you had to walk through water. Most of it was like mud, and there was like a little side room off to like the left of the entrance of the cave. And I went through it. I went to that cave twice, and the second time I actually went through that and like went into like I had to like crawl first through this hole, and there was like a bunch of like albino spiders and crickets and stuff like that. It was I'm not an super outdoorsy person, so that was a lot for me. But I did it, and I did it in Converse, which was a bad idea. I ruined my Converse.
That reminds me, Clark, you probably have seen this movie. It's either The Cave or it's a different one. It's where a Spanish explorers get lost in on one of their things, and some cavers in modern day go down. And they evolve into basically albino bat people. It's a really good movie.
The Descent.
Yes. Yep. Okay. There was like around that time a bunch of cave movies came out for whatever reason, but The Descent, and they found like some Spanish artifacts, and but their descendants were just like crazy bat people that were blind. It was a good movie though.